Well, this is one of those exciting episodes that I really like because on my programs on radio, you may know, of course, that we like to talk about the importance of challenging toxic groupthink. And we apply that mission to all sorts of knowledge that relates to our life. And we go into things like physics and chemistry with our friend Dr. Yu, theoretical physicist. But we also like to look at something a little closer to home, which is our health, our body, even our mental health. And the direction that we've been going on in this adventure together has led us towards a space very close to the world of what we call carnivore, eating nose to tail, eating ancestrally, not being, you could say there's some benefits to ketosis, which we can get into, but we're looking at what did our ancestors eat and what should we be thinking about in our health today. And we look at it in a variety of directions. We've had Dr. David Diamond on to talk about the importance of looking at our heart in a different way, using animal fats instead of demonizing them. We've had Dr. Thomas Seyfried on, who talks about what he's been doing in microbiology with treating cancer. And now we have a periodontist named Dr. Al Danenberg with us. He's a certified medicine practitioner. He's a certified primal health coach, and he's the author of several books, including The Better Belly Blueprint and Is Your Gut Killing You? Thank you for joining me, Dr. Al.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I think a lot of people are of the opinion that, the teeth and the mouth gives you a lot of clues as to what's going on in the body. And I guess you would probably agree with that, right? Is that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, dentists are the ideal health professional to look at their patient's mouth because they do it in an extended period of time and examine what is going on in the mouth that literally is a mirror to the rest of the body. There's no other health professional that is even trained to look in the mouth and understand what's going on. The big problem, though, is when there are problems in the mouth, many of those problems never started in the mouth. It actually started in the gut, and changes in that wonderful, friendly garden of bacteria in the gut that affects the immune system and then affects the mouth and creates the problems in the mouth. But the mouth is a mirror, and it needs to be understood, and other diseases can be evaluated from what's going on in the mouth.
Well, we're going to get into a whole host of things, including your own battle and journey with cancer diagnosis you've been using Carnivore to really do a number on that, and that's exciting. We want to get into that. But I want to kind of start at the basics, which kind of like, let's go back in time to when we're kids and we're told, you got to, take care of your teeth. Because when you're a little kid, there's not a lot of health problems you're worried about, but you're told you got to brush, you got to floss, you got to get your dental checkups. Where do we go from here? Why do we see children having so many cavities? Let's start when you're a little kid, 5, 6 years old. We're seeing kids today, teeth are brown, black. They're getting, tooth destruction of the tooth, doesn't look very strong. What is going on there? Is that just too much sugar and they're not brushing their teeth, or is there something a little bit more complicated?
Well, actually, it is absolutely related to diet. There is no question. The refined carbohydrates, the processed sugars, are tremendously destructive. They're destructive to the gut microbiome, and it changes the bacteria in the mouth. We have maybe 700 potential species of bacteria in the mouth. Some of them are potentially bad, but they are not bad unless things change in our immune system to allow these potentially pathogenic bacteria to overgrow. So the bacteria that are overgrowing because problems in the gut, problems in the immune system, and then diet that includes lots of sugars and carbs, feed these potentially bad bacteria and make them overgrow. And those potentially bad bacteria can create tooth decay, they can create gum disease, and create a host of other things that can get leaking into the bloodstream through the gum tissues, creating many, many other systemic problems. So you can have damage that is caused by a leaky gut where bad bacteria get into the bloodstream through the gut lining, and then infection in the mouth that gets into the bloodstream from under the gum tissues.
Now, I've heard Dr. Gundry say, the popular doctor, say that leaky gut is primarily, I believe, from lectins. Is that what you would
Well,
say
that's only
too?
one
Yeah.
thing. Anything that damages the microbiome. So lectins are a factor, oxalates are a factor, phytates are a factor. These are what's called anti-nutrients in many different plant foods that we're eating. But dirty electromagnetic fields have an effect on the gut. Poor sleep habits have effect on the gut. Over-exercise and under-exercise affects the gut microbiome, and especially stress. And today's stress, because of what's going on in our country and the pandemic, stress absolutely affects the gut microbiome. And when it changes this friendly assortment of bacteria in the gut to other unhealthy growth of pathogenic bacteria, then the immune system gets compromised, which is actually our defense from all types of infection. But when we have a compromised immune system, it allows other bacteria in other parts of the body to break down and create disease on the skin, in the eyes, and in the mouth, and everywhere else.
So when you see, a lot of times people say, well, it doesn't matter if a young kid has cavities or tooth decay, they're going to have their baby teeth out and they'll start over there and everything's fine. But you're saying that when you're seeing it in the teeth, it's already a reflection of something worse in the gut. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it doesn't go away by itself. So when mom and dad are feeding the kids crackers and sweet foods and sugary foods and drinks like, sodas that have lots of sugar, even sodas that have artificial sweeteners, which are very harmful to the gut microbiome. The acids in the sodas are very harmful. So these foods damage not just the teeth, but the gut microbiome, this gut bacteria. And when that happens, it can create, again, what's called leaky gut, a way of toxic material that goes from the gut into the bloodstream and becomes systemic. And this systemic inflammation affects every organ system in our body. And the sad thing is that the changes in the chronic inflammation in the blood system doesn't create disease the next day or the next month, maybe not even the next year. It could take decades for the damage to accumulate to the point where you have a manifestation of the disease and you say, oh my God, I have this or I have that. It never was that way until last week. Well, it may have started 2, 3, 4 decades ago before you realized that you had the problem. It's a slow process in many cases.
And people have a high time preference, so they prefer short-term pleasure over long-term. I'll take the
Sure,
short-term pleasure and keep hitting the pleasure button and then worry about the
sure,
long-term damage
sure.
some other day.
And they're not really aware of the consequences because the general media is advertising the foods that are, comfort foods that are sweet and crunchy and salty, and all of those things may satisfy, but if their elements damage the gut microbiome over time, it creates a host of chronic disease. In the United States, 60%, according to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 60% of the US population has at least one chronic disease. 70% of all deaths in the United States are related to one chronic disease. And 72% of the US population is either overweight or obese. But if you look at primal societies, people, and there are not very many in the world today, but people that are living not with westernized diets, they have hardly any chronic disease. They have very, very rare periodontal or gum disease or tooth decay. It's another interesting thing, and that has nothing to do with humans, but if you look at animals in the wild living on their natural foods and doing what they do naturally, they're not obese. They don't have chronic disease. They do not have tooth decay and gum disease. But if you domesticate cats and dogs, the foods that we're feeding them, if you look at the ingredients in dog food and cat food, they have an abundance of tooth decay and gum disease and other organic chronic diseases, which is very interesting. It's diet and what's called epigenetics, our lifestyle, everything that affects our DNA affects these problems.
So what about folks who say, okay, yeah, we're going to get rid of the processed foods for our family, but we're still going to have whole foods. We're going to replace dairy milk with oat milk. We're going to, replace red meat and butter with, beans and legumes and, lots of fruits for our energy instead of fat. Can you live a healthy life that way for decades too, or no?
No, I don't believe so. Because you're talking about removing very healthy foods, like now we're talking about pastured animals. Red meat is very healthy. It's not the red meat or the processed meat that is used in some studies that is very tainted and actually creates problems. But in a carnivore diet with nose to tail, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is an extremely healthy way of eating. As a matter of fact, our species, the evolution of humankind, at least for the last 160,000 years, have basically eaten animal products and some plants. We have a digestive system that's designed to better digest animal products than plant foods. And some of the plants, we don't even have the enzymes to digest what's called anti-nutrients. These are elements in plant products that we can't digest and are harmful for our gut. So some of the plants are okay. And we are omnivores, meaning that we do eat meat and plants, but our body is designed better to metabolize the meat products. So healthy meat products, healthy butter is very, very beneficial. And some of the plants that you mentioned, like beans and some fruits and very many vegetables, do have anti-nutrients. They affect different people in different ways, but they're irritating to the gut. And that's the problem. When it irritates the gut and it changes the microbiome to a unhealthy growth of bacteria, then chronic disease ensues.
So it's interesting because I've heard that the first 5 years or so of your life are extremely important for your health for the long term, right? And
Yeah.
how many kids are even fed red meat or ribeye, you know what I mean, or butter? They're given applesauce and loads of soy milk or whatever. I mean.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And what I mentioned is that unfortunately, our society is plagued with chronic disease. And it's because it's starting at early ages. Our microbiome, this garden of bacteria in our gut, literally is established around the age of 2.5 to 3 years old. And it stays with us for the rest of our life. It changes a little bit, changes as we get older, but it's basically our protective mechanism. We have like 38 trillion microbes in our body, and we only have 30 trillion or so human cells. So we're more microbial than human. And that is what sustains us if it's in a state of balance.
So what happens to folks? I mean, so if you don't have proper nutrition, how many kids are getting the brain food of animal fats? Hardly any. And it's
I
a
agree
wonder
with
that
you.
we have so many problems. So, is it something that you can reverse within, if you've gone decades and decades of eating margarine and, fruits and sugars more than animal fats and animal proteins, can you reverse it after decades of damage, or is it hard?
Yes, you can reverse it. And I think that I'm an example of reversing it. So yes, unfortunately, you're not starting off correctly. And that's not always true. There are families that are oriented and feed their children healthier foods and not the high processed carbohydrates. But there are many, many families that do, unfortunately, because we don't know any better, and we're looking at the shelves in our grocery stores, and these products look wonderful, except when you look at the ingredients, they are loaded with chemicals and all kinds of processed carbohydrates, which actually our body does not need.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, but it can be reversed, of course.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with dental health for a second, I want to go back to the mouth. Is there some myths that you could help us overcome? A lot of people have asked me questions in anticipation of this interview with you. I put a note out to our audience and got different questions about they wanted
Well,
to
you can
know.
throw all those questions out at me.
Yeah. So, for example, one asked when they want to poke at the pockets of your teeth. Is that a good thing for a dentist to do when they poke it?
Absolutely.
That's fine.
Absolutely. That's how they can identify if you have active gum disease that is getting under the gum, damaging the bone or not.
Okay. So that's
Yes.
a good tactic. What about the use of fluoride? I had that question rise up from somebody. Is fluoride a good thing to use for your teeth?
Let me put it to you this way. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. It affects the nerve tissues in young children, infants, and even um, fetuses, can affect the IQ of the child, lessens the IQ. Fluoride competes with iodine for the thyroid hormone. So is fluoride helpful? No, we don't need fluoride. We need less sugar. We're eating, here's the problem. We're eating sugar, but we don't want the sugar to cause tooth decay. So we're painting a barrier on the tooth to maybe prevent the sugar from affecting the bacteria that creates a lot of acid to create tooth decay. The smart thing would be not to eat the sugar. The sugar is the processed carbohydrates that are extremely damaging to every part of the body. We don't need it. It just, we're used to eating it.
Well, what about the good carbs like fruit, sweet potatoes? Do those
Yes.
rot the teeth too, or are those okay
So,
from your perspective?
in their proper perspective and quantity, fruits and vegetables may be beneficial. But if you're looking at the medical science, and this is controversial, by the way, only because there's so many people that don't believe this, but the medical science shows that a nose to tail animal-based diet with just a few fruits or maybe some vegetables is the way to go. And I'll give you an example. There is a medical clinic in Budapest, Hungary, called the Paleomedicina Clinic. It's been in existence for about 9 or so, 10 years. I think they started around 2010, 2011. They've treated over 5,000 patients. They treat basically patients that have severe chronic diseases and cancers, many of which are considered incurable diseases. They are treating their patients. Now we're talking about humans, not mice and rats, human patients with their strict animal-based diet, which they call the Paleolithic ketogenic diet. That is a strict nose to tail animal-based diet. It is utilizing fat to protein ratios of 2-to-1 measured in grams. Maybe if they're doing any fruits or vegetables, maybe 10% of the volume of a plate of food would be fruits or vegetables, but generally 90% or more animal-based. And they have compelling and quite impressive results of their patients that they actually publish in case reports in various medical journals of cures of these incurable diseases based on Western medicine from a strict animal-based diet. Very impressive. This is where I gain much of my knowledge about the carnivore diet, and that's why I started it in January 1st of 2020, which we can get into.
Yeah, and I believe Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who I've had on a few times, has referenced and worked with that group. He's of Boston College. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Oh, I am very
Yeah.
familiar with him. He believes that cancer is a disease of metabolic dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction, both of which affects the immune system And all of that compromise is the major cause of cancer today. And I agree with them completely.
So what is the, because I know that Paul Saladino had a little bit different interpretation on that. He had suggested that maybe there was something more about the gut that was being affected rather than the mitochondria. And I don't, I don't know if it's an either
In
or.
what respect now? Because
It,
both.
right, in the sense of it's not about the, I don't remember exactly the disagreement. There was something that he was disagreeing about. He thought it was a good thing to do, but maybe it was helping helping the cancer patients for a different reason. Is it the absence of the, let's say, the linoleic acid that you get when you're eating vegetable oils, which most Western diets have massive amounts of? Is it the absence of that that's causing these people on the Paleolithic keto diet in this clinic?
It's one very small aspect, but you are correct. See, the linoleic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid, which actually is very inflammatory. And not that it's a problem in its right ratio, but when it's in excess amounts, it creates more inflammation. And inflammation is one of the ingredients that affects the immune system and creates leaky gut and affects all this chronic systemic inflammation that goes through the body.
Okay.
There are many factors that are involved to
With
improve
cancer.
the immune system or not improve the immune system.
Right. From what I understand with Dr. Thomas Seyfried's explanation, it's cancer needs sugar to live. It needs to ferment glucose, right?
Well, it ferments that and also glutamine.
Glutamine, yeah.
So cancer feeds off of glucose it loves, and it needs and it can use glutamine, which is an amino acid. It doesn't do very well with ketones. So that's why a ketogenic diet is beneficial, because the cancer cells don't like ketones, but they can still use the amino acid glutamine to help create energy to create and reproduce themselves.
So if you're, so is that the primary tactic that's finding significant effects for these people in the Paleo Medicina clinic in Hungary?
Well, the primary effect is that it is not an inflammatory diet, and the gut microbiome is healing, and the concept of a leaky gut is repaired. So there's nothing getting leaked into the blood system that shouldn't be there. So there's no chronic systemic inflammation. So the chronic systemic inflammation from, let's say, unhealthy diets is actually causing the potential progression of cancer.
And that could include, just for my listeners to be clear, because we're so trained to hear unhealthy diet means pizza and donuts, but that that also may include lots of high sugar fruits and beans and
Yes, sir.
and grains, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any of those vegetables that are high in anti-nutrients, these elements that are literally irritating to the gut, only because we do not possess, our DNA doesn't know how to make the enzymes to destroy these elements. So, animals that we eat that are basically herbivores, they're mainly eating plants, they have a digestive system that actually has evolved to destroy these anti-nutrients so that the nutrients themselves, the good stuff, can get absorbed into their fat and into their collagenous material, into their muscle meat, and into their organs. And those nutrients, when we eat the animal, nose to tail, meaning we eat all those 4 different parts that I just mentioned, we get those nutrients without the anti-nutrients, without the elements that our body can't digest. We get those nutrients in what's called a biologically active form, meaning that it gets absorbed into our body rapidly and it benefits us. And these are the nutrients that we need that we theoretically could get from plants, but we can get them better from the animals that eat them, as long as these animals are raised properly and they're not eating grains, they're eating grass, they don't have any hormones or antibiotics fed to them. So that way their meat and fat and organs and collagenous material are very healthy for us.
So eat the rabbit, not the carrot.
Yes, sir.
So it's like operating systems. It's like we're PC or Mac, whichever your preference
Yeah,
is, and plants are the other one. They're the
yeah,
other operating
exactly. I
system.
get it. You're perfectly right on. Yeah.
And so you want to, and so what is inflammation, by the way? What is that? What does
The
that mean?
body creates inflammation to heal.
Is
So
it
if you
heat?
have,
Is it heat?
it creates heat, yes, but when you have a cut, your body recognizes there's something happening in the tissue. It has to heal it. So the immune system gets activated. A lot of different chemicals are produced by a variety of cells to say, hey, I need help here. And a whole bunch of white cells start to form, and platelets start to form and get into the area. So if it's a cut, it stops the bleeding. If there's bacteria, then different white cells gobble up the bacteria. And this is the inflammation. There's more fluid, there is heat. All of this is generated. But when the body starts to heal, that inflammation goes away. But if the body is constantly irritated by something chronically, it doesn't go away. And the body keeps producing all these inflammatory chemicals and cells, then the immune system, which is kind of the general to allow all of these wonderful infantrymen to work and heal the body, it gets overworked. It's constantly trying to heal one area in one body part and another area in another body part. And then when you get another infection into the body, like a virus, the immune system is so weakened from this chronic inflammation that it can't mount the proper defense. And that's why we get very sick and sometimes die.
And people are eating lots of kale and quinoa and broccoli and oat milk, and they think that they're giving their body a healing time. But you're saying no, all those anti-nutrients, the plants don't want to be eaten. They can't run away, as Paul Saladino is famous for saying.
Yes,
So
exactly
they've
correct.
got to find a way to deter people or animals or other whatever from eating it, right? And so
That's
that's their
correct.
so they're trying to so that when you get that stomach cramp after eating lots of those that mixture of greens, that's a sign that you weren't supposed to eat that. In the animal kingdom, you would go back looking for that fatty mastodon again. You wouldn't go back for the kale you bit into.
That's correct. That's correct. And that fatty mastodon would fill you up pretty well, and you probably could go for days without eating because you've got all these wonderful fat cells in your body, and your body what is called metabolic flexibility. When you're not eating the carbohydrates, and you're in a fasting state only because you can't find any more food, your body knows it's got the proper mechanism to take the fat from the fat cells and break that down and create fuel, and your body goes into a state of ketosis. And ketosis is a method where the fatty acids in the fat cells are used as fuel, and they burn ketones, which are very clean burning. And these are, like we said before, cancer cells don't like ketones, and ketones are great for the brain because it gets through the blood-brain barrier, and you have a lot of energy and clarity, and your body heals itself very nicely when you're eating a ketogenic type of diet, or your
So,
body is only breaking down fat cells.
so let's talk about that for a second. So do you think it's important to be in ketosis as much as possible? Because
No,
that's another debate that people have
no.
within this
I
community.
think I think if we look at our primal ancestors, which I think is the proper perspective when we look at what is good and what's bad based on our eating styles and metabolisms. So if we look at our primal ancestors, they probably hunted, and they had a successful kill, and they had plenty of food and they ate it. And then they couldn't find animals for much of the time. And maybe they could find some fruits and vegetables, but they probably were not terribly hungry because they fed from all this fat and meat products and organ products. And their bodies utilized the fat in their body that was already stored until they got another animal that they killed. Now, they stayed in ketosis during the period of time when their body was using the fats. And when they needed, maybe they were hungry, they couldn't find an animal, they found fruits and vegetables, they ate that, and their body used those carbohydrates as an immediate fuel. And when they were not available, then their body went right back to burning fat cells. They were not addicted to the carbohydrates. They had no processed carbohydrates. They didn't have cravings for carbohydrates. So yes, I think it's important to be in ketosis because it's a very efficient way to burn fuel, but it's also very important for our body to switch from fat to carbohydrates because that's the natural process of our metabolism. So in my way of eating, I cycle in and out of ketosis. I'm in ketosis for maybe 5 to 6 days a week. And I know that for a variety of reasons. And then I eat a significant amount of healthy carbs. We can go over my diet in a moment if you want, and get out of ketosis for a day or two, let my body work its wonders when it's burning carbohydrates. And then the next day, I'll go back to ketosis without any cravings because my body is used to doing that back and forth, or that's what's called metabolic flexibility. And that's the way our human species has evolved for at least 160,000 years.
So what are the best carbs to cycle in and out of?
So that's a great question. So here's what I do. When I am cycling into a carb day, I will look and eat, and this is not necessarily measured, but on approximately, I'll eat about 100 to 150 grams of carbs that day. I get much of my carbs from raw honey. I love raw honey. Actually, honey is an animal product. It's made by bees, but it's got a lot of carbs, obviously. Every tablespoon of honey has about 17 grams of carbs. So I'll eat several tablespoons of carbs that day, honey that day. I might have an apple. I might have a mango. If I'm eating some vegetables, I might have some romaine lettuce, something like that, maybe an avocado. Those are the foods that I would eat to get my carbs.
Do you still eat animal fats that day, or do you just take out?
Yes, so that's a great question. So I reduce the animal fats. I am still eating some protein with some animal fat, but I'm not eating the 2-to-1 ratio of fat to protein measured in grams. So I'm reducing the fat, increasing the carbohydrate for that day or maybe 2 days, and then switch back to my ketosis.
Now, what about they call these ancestral grains like einkorn flour that was supposed to be not tampered with for 12,000 years? Would that be a safe carb in this kind of wheelhouse, or would you still want to avoid something like these?
I would avoid those carbs for the primary reason that grains literally break down to gliadin, which is one type of protein that is never digested completely. And gliadin in the gut damages the lining of the gut and encourages leaky gut. So grains have never been the healthiest food for humans.
Why did we spend so much time cultivating them to create civilization?
Because it was a quick way to feed the masses.
Let them eat cake. And we'll eat the pheasant, right?
It was part of the civilized way of agriculture when man learned to cultivate the seeds of grasses, which are grains, into flour and created products that were soft and fluffy and could sweeten them. And it was very desirable because we learned those textures and flavors were great. It could feed the masses and you would stay full, but not knowing the damage it was doing. I mean, again, we are a survivor of 160,000 years if we're looking at modern Homo sapiens. And the last 8 to 10,000 years of that period, we developed agriculture and started processing foods that our species never ate, and our DNA never was designed to digest. Our DNA, our code, our 20,000 or so genes make you and me who we are. 99.9% of our genetic code is the same for all humans.
Mm-hmm.
what makes me me and you is only 0.1% of that DNA code. But the 99.9% knows exactly what it can do and what it can't do. It knows that it has to tell you, you have to breathe air, you have to drink water, you have to eat food, or you will die. But on the other end of that spectrum, our DNA code knows that if you eat certain foods that I do, and I'm talking about I'm DNA now, I am not capable of creating the enzymes to detoxify it from you. If you eat certain foods that are literally poisons, you will die. Now, it may not kill a cow, and it may not kill a lion, but it will kill you because my DNA, your DNA, is not designed to do that. So what do we do as humans? We feed ourselves all these poisons every day, right? So we're eating processed grains, we're eating processed sugars, we're eating these seed and vegetable seed oils that are high in omega-6 fatty acids, highly oxidized, very damaging to our gut and our gut membrane and individual cell membranes, and all of this stuff we do every day. So we're constantly challenging our DNA, and we get sick. And we don't get sick right away, but we get sick. And as we get sick, we get debilitated, and we're living 20 or 30 years with a debilitating disease until we die. That's not the way we should live.
Dr. Chris Knob, I'm going to interview him soon, and he puts the onus. He still points to processed flours and sugars, but he puts the primary accusation on linoleic acid and vegetable
Well, I
oils.
agree. That's
Do
a
you think, is it
huge,
the big
huge
one,
factor.
or is it
No,
not really?
I think it is a big one, but it's not the big one. I think the big one is all processed foods and chemicals and all the, not only the chemicals that are preservatives and emulsifiers in foods, but the chemicals that are destroying theoretically, weeds in the agricultural fields and all of that glyphosate, those chemical residues get on the food, they stay with the food, they're processed with the food, they're not on the ingredient label. You don't see on the ingredient label that there are some elements of lead or mercury or Roundup or glyphosate in it, but there are, and those chemicals are very damaging to our body.
What do you do for drinking? Do you avoid all water that's been in a plastic container, or do you not go that far?
Here's a very interesting fact, and that's a great question to bring up. We drink water, or we drink filtered water. But of course, filtered water filters out all the bad stuff, but all the good stuff, all the minerals would go away. So, or the majority of the minerals. Our primal ancestors got their basic calcium and magnesium from spring water, these mineral waters that when the clouds create rain and the rain goes through the earth and it gets under and it gets filtered out from the dirt and the rocks and it gets into the aquifers, and all of a sudden we drink the spring water from these. They're loaded with natural minerals, which our body requires. Now we're drinking tap water, we're drinking filtered water because we think it's healthier. We're drinking bottled water, even if it's plastic or glass, but it's all filtered and the minerals are gone. So what I drink, I love Gerolsteiner, which is a German sparkling water that is probably one of the highest waters with natural minerals in it. I like Fiji water. I like Evian. Fiji comes from Fiji. Evian comes from France. Gerolsteiner comes from Germany. All those waters are readily available at local grocery stores, at least in my neighborhood. So those are the waters that I drink.
How do tea and coffee stack up in terms of anti-nutrients compared to eating vegetables? Are they a lot less anti-nutrients?
Coffee is great. Coffee is good. I drink coffee. Tea is okay. The black tea has a high level of oxalates. So black tea would be something I would not recommend.
More than coffee in terms of oxalates?
Yes, more than coffee. From my research.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so coffee is low. Green tea is lower than black tea. Most herbal teas are not a problem at all. So those teas are not necessarily an issue unless it's black tea.
Is caffeine a stressor to the gut, since gut
I
health is
think
important?
caffeine can be a problem in excess. Certainly, it
Mhm.
has an effect on sleep. It's a stimulant, so there are problems. But drinking a couple cups of coffee, meaning a cup is 8 ounces, so maybe
Yeah,
16 ounces or so of coffee a day in the early part of the day, not after 2 p.m., for example.
yeah.
Um, I don't think that's a problem, and I think maybe there's some benefit.
Now, when you mentioned honey, that you consume honey and some fruit or so once a day or once a week or once or 2 days, 1 or 2 days a week, do you worry about that with the sugar though, or with the
No,
cancer
not at
feeding?
all.
How's
No,
how
not
so?
at all. No, no. There are some studies that show that honey is actually has over 200 biologically active chemicals
Huh,
that heal. It's anti-inflammatory. It really has huge beneficial
right.
effects on the body. So no, I don't consider that the sugar that we're talking about.
Is there any evidence that cancer cells can't ferment honey as well, maybe because of those other components?
I I
That would be
don't know
interesting.
that as a
Yeah,
fact. I do not know that as a
yeah,
fact, so I can't comment
yeah.
on it.
Yeah. It's just interesting to to see where we could pursue more research or something in some of these areas, I think that would help people a lot because people have a sweet tooth, right? And if they could feel comfortable knowing, hey, you can eat these fruits or this honey in a limited basis within reason,
There
then you
is
don't have to worry
research.
about cancer every time every year
I
you
don't
go.
think that that's going to cause your
Right,
cancer,
right,
and I don't think that it's going to cause cancer to progress
right.
in its right proportion. The number of grams that you're eating. Um, you can stay in ketosis if you're below 20, 25 grams of carbs a day. So it's not going to be that kind of a problem.
Right. You could have a little thing of honey
Yeah, you
without.
could have it. You can have a tablespoon of honey, which is a lot of honey, and that's only 17 grams of carbs.
Mhm. Now, as it pertains to cavities, I've heard of butter pooling for getting rid of cavities. Do you recommend natural ways to get rid of cavities, or do you like the traditional filling process of a
Hmm.
cavity?
So I like the natural way to give your body the nutrients it needs, which would be vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K2. Certainly, all those wonderful fat soluble vitamins are important, um, and not the sugars, and have a healthy gut microbiome. What I do not agree with is oil pulling, and that's going to be controversial to all these natural people that are listening to the show, and I'll tell you why. You need to have healthy bacteria, a healthy garden of bacteria in your mouth and in your gut and on your skin and everywhere in your body. If you use antimicrobial anythings on a daily basis, whatever, antimicrobial soaps, antimicrobial toothpaste, antimicrobial mouthwashes, all of those antimicrobials are indiscriminate killers of bacteria. They may kill very bad bacteria, and they absolutely will kill some very good bacteria. And it changes the microbiome so that it is not in a healthy state any longer. So oil pulling, which is good if you have infection in your mouth, let's say, or you have a procedure like an extraction or something that was done and the gum is sore or inflamed, oil pulling is beneficial for a week to 10 days, used as a therapeutic. Yes, it will kill some good bacteria and some bad bacteria. And after that period of time, you help your body to regain its natural garden of bacteria. We're okay. But if you use it every day, then you're going to constantly kill a lot of good bacteria, and it never gets to go into a balanced state. So I don't believe in that.
So, what's the best way to treat cavities, in your opinion? Or
Well, first of all, again, make sure your gut microbiome and the foods you're eating are healthy. And then if you're eating healthy foods, getting the nutrients and fat soluble vitamins that you need, you won't have decay. And if you already have decay, your body has the ability, if it's early decay, it's only in the first layer of the enamel of a tooth, then early decay can remineralize because your saliva is loaded with these wonderful healthy minerals because of the foods that you've eaten. And you're salivating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you don't have this you have the healthy gut and the healthy diet, and you don't have any antimicrobial elements in your mouth, like antimicrobial mouthwashes, the saliva bathes the tooth and it can actually remineralize it. And I will tell you another thing that's going to be interesting for your listeners, and that is dental plaque. You know, that stuff around the gum tooth margin?
Yeah. Is that the
Dental
same as tartar?
Yeah, well, tartar is the calcified dental plaque.
Okay.
But dental plaque, that soft stuff of bacteria, is healthy until it's not healthy.
So it's good to have that, huh?
Absolutely. That dental plaque, let me tell you, dental plaque is a protective covering. It's one of the healthy biofilms in the body. So let me give you an example of what's going on. The tooth is a hard structure. It pierces the gum tissue and is anchored in sterile jawbone, correct? You can envision that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no other place in the body where a hard structure like a tooth or something pierces the epithelial skin, the gum tissue, and anchors itself in sterile bone. So if you had nothing to protect that margin where the tooth pierces the gum and gets into the bone, it would be like a sliding board for bacteria and viruses and everything to get into your body. So there are many ways to protect that very, very fragile area, but one of the initial ways to protect that area is the dental plaque. So dental plaque is made up of, there's potentially 700 species or so of bacteria in your mouth, but dental plaque is made up of 200 or 300 species of bacteria. That's quite a number of friends and foes that are neighbors to one another. And they're living in this soft dental plaque. And they do three things to protect that very particular area where the tooth gets into the gum, into the bone. It has natural buffers, chemical buffers, to make the acid level no lower than 5.5. So a acid level of 3 or 2 is very acid and it will cause tooth decay. So the dental plaque actually balances the pH, or the acid level, between the saliva and the tooth surface. It also acts as a gatekeeper. It is literally the gatekeeper for allowing natural minerals from the saliva to get into the tooth surface to remineralize and protect the tooth, so that if there's early decay, it can repair it. And the other thing that it does is that all of these different species of bacteria produce different types of hydrogen peroxide on their own. And that hydrogen peroxide is highly toxic to other pathogens in the mouth that want to get into where the gum and the tooth margin is. And it literally kills those bacteria, those bad guys, from getting into that margin where the tooth pierces the gum. So dental plaque is very healthy. We don't want to remove it on a regular basis.
That's what dentists want to do, though. They always talk about removing the plaque, right?
Yeah. So put the dots together. Our primal ancestors did not have a dental cave to go to get their fluoride treatments, yet they hardly ever had tooth decay or gum disease. They certainly didn't buy their toothbrushes from the local primal health store. So there were no natural ways to brush and floss teeth, but they never, or very rarely, had tooth decay or gum disease. And why is that? Well, they had healthy guts, they had a healthy diet, they had healthy dental plaque. And when the dental plaque actually got calcified, that hard tartar was also protective. And we know that when we look at dental jaw specimens from our ancestors from 10 to 20,000 years ago, we can literally see the tooth and the bone, very little tooth decay, practically no bone disease, yet there were hard substances where the tooth meets the bone. That was the dental tartar, or the plaque, that got calcified, with no gum disease or tooth decay. So they didn't have these diseases. Now, modern man has lots and lots of gum disease because we also have lots of infection in the gut and we have bad diets. So we need to make sure that we're cleaning our mouth. So we have to clean our mouth well, and we have to remove unhealthy dental plaque, because the plaque, when it is healthy, can become unhealthy with other pathogenic bacteria overgrowing it. So good brushing and good flossing is important. Cleaning your tongue is important. And that is not going to damage the healthy layer of dental plaque around the tooth.
So you don't want to remove the dental plaque because that will actually exacerbate health problems for the teeth and the gums, right?
That's correct. The dental plaque is a healthy biofilm. So to use food products or toothpastes or mouthwashes that have chemicals that literally destroy the ability of the plaque to form on the tooth is not healthy.
Including these natural things, right? Like charcoal and
Oh
xylitol
yeah.
and how about coconut oil dipping in the
No.
tooth? That's bad too, huh?
Well, coconut oil is, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not as aggressive as certain other antimicrobials. If you were to swish with coconut oil for 20 minutes, it is very damaging if you do it every day.
Is there a way to eyeball because most people listening are probably eating a standard American diet to one
Yeah.
degree or another. Is there a way to eyeball your dental plaque that you have to say, okay,
Yeah,
this
I
is
think that
problematic, it needs to be taken off? Is there a color?
generally, I will tell you that there are little cleaning devices that you can use between the teeth. Almost looks like a toothpick, but it's made with silicone, very soft. And you clean by putting those little bristles and rubbing it at the gum tooth margin between each tooth of your mouth. The ones that I like are called TP, and they're literally spelled TEPE. Soft picks, I think, or I can't remember the exact name, but TP. And when you use them, if you use them and you rub the gum as you're supposed to, and you get any bleeding whatsoever, you have active gum disease and you have active unhealthy dental plaque. And that would tell me that you also have an unhealthy gut microbiome and you probably have a very unhealthy diet. And all of that needs to be treated.
So would the plaque need to be removed in that scenario?
Yes, but also
Yeah.
if there's active infection that's gotten under the gum and getting into the bone, you've got a very significant infection in the mouth that is its own problem because it's getting into the bloodstream, and just making the diet healthy and cleaning out the gut or making your gut healthy may not stop that gum disease because it's too deep now. So you might need treatment from a dentist who understands how to treat these problems.
Very interesting. What about another thing was brought up from a listener was wisdom teeth. Or is that a scam to have your wisdom teeth taken out?
Well, there's no reason to have your wisdom teeth removed unless they're infected. And if there's infection, there's got to be a reason why it's infected. But just to remove wisdom teeth because you think you don't need these third molars, absolutely not correct.
What about those supersonic toothbrushes? Are those dangerous for teeth and
No,
gums?
electric toothbrushes are fine. I love electric toothbrushes. I use what's called a Sonicare. My wife loves the Oral-B, Braun, two different types, two different styles of electric brushes, but they're very effective.
So knowing what you know, what do you use for your tooth care? Do you use a toothpaste or you make up your own
So
thing?
you do not need to use toothpaste. You just need to put some water on a toothbrush. I use a Sonicare. I use these little TP cleaners between my teeth. I use some dental floss to make sure there's no fibrous stuck between the contacts of my teeth. And I use and I clean my tongue, the top of my tongue, because of some excess bacteria can be on the tongue. And that is what I do.
With no
That's all.
with no toothpaste.
I don't need toothpaste. There are some toothpastes that are very effective. One of the brands that has very, very healthy elements and nothing antimicrobial is a toothpaste called Revitin, Revitin. It's a great toothpaste.
Very good. Well, another one was the teeth whitening. Everybody wants to have white teeth. Is it good to have white teeth, or is
Well,
yellow
white
teeth
teeth,
healthy?
if you want to remove some stain that's on the surface of the teeth, you can do it in a very natural way if you wanted to. You could take some baking soda, not baking powder, but baking soda. You can make a paste of it with some water, and you could brush that aggressively on the surface of the tooth enamel, not at the gum margin, and it will literally help remove surface stain. So that's a very effective. There are teeth whitening procedures in a dental office that are effective using concentrations of high concentrations of peroxide. But what is a problem is people that use some of these bleaching trays, if you're familiar with that, and they use hydrogen peroxide, high concentration of hydrogen peroxide in the bleaching tray to keep their teeth white all the time. So they use these bleaching trays every night. And that peroxide can leak under the gum and get into your bloodstream.
Wow.
And some of it you swallow and it gets into your gut, and it can become very damaging to your body.
Very interesting. Well, you know, this is all very fascinating. We could go on and on, but I'll just wrap it up here with just a couple more questions, and then we'll talk about where we can keep up with your work.
Sure.
It's so interesting. And about carnivore, right? So are you one of those folks that says it's got to be grass-fed organic? Because a lot of folks, they don't want to, they don't want to spend that extra money, they want to get that supermarket beef.
Well, if you want to be carnivore for health reasons, it has to be grass-fed and organic, or you're putting chemicals that are very destructive to your body in your body, which is conflicting with the concept of eating a healthy, nutritious, anti-inflammatory food.
And that's the grains and pesticides.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a difference in cost, but then again, how much does it cost for you when you get sick?
Right.
Yeah, so this is more prevention than just nutrition.
What about the situation we have where folks are very resistant to eating dairy? Is dairy something that people should avoid for most people?
Dairy is a problem. Dairy, unfortunately, pasteurized dairy, even more of a problem, but dairy has a protein called casein, and casein doesn't do well in our guts, and our immune system can confuse casein with gluten, and it create inflammation and damage to the gut lining. In addition, lactose, which is one of the sugars in milk and dairy products, most or many people are very unable to metabolize. So it creates a lot of other problems. So dairy is not a food humans need, and dairy is more than likely a problem, especially if you have autoimmune diseases or any other problems that are affected by a leaky gut, and I would avoid dairy.
And mushrooms, are those inflammatory too, or are those?
No, I have no problems with mushrooms.
Yeah. So, tell us an update on your status in your fighting this cancer diagnosis. I think.
Well, this is another story, of course, unto itself.
Yeah.
So I was diagnosed with incurable bone marrow cancer. Specifically, it's called IgA kappa light chain multiple myeloma in September 2018. I was given 3 to 6 months to live. Since it was incurable, I rejected chemotherapy because the only thing I was concerned about was a quality of life, not longevity in life. So thinking that I'm only going to have 3 to 6 months to live, I rejected chemotherapy and evaluated and created what I call my unconventional cancer protocols. These are a variety of things that I do to support my immune system, because that's the most important thing I need to be robust to fight this disease. And I did extremely well for about a year. And then come August of 2019, because I have this disease that's creating lots of holes in my bone, I've had a lot of pathological fractures. In August of 2019, I literally had severe fractures on my right side all at one time. Broken femur, broken right humerus, and broken ribs. All at one time, crashed to the floor. I was in writhing pain and I was ready to die. And literally, I went to a hospital to die. but I rallied. And I rallied to the extent that I got back on my protocols. And long story short, May 8th, 2020, I had a PET scan, which is an X-ray that shows cancer cells throughout the body. And my PET scan showed no active cancer cells in my entire body. Now, I'm not in remission. I have no cure, but I do know how to improve my immune system. And I actually do coaching with people literally all over the world to improve their guts and their diet and their immune systems to make them as healthy as they can possibly be.
And that's for all variety of illnesses or chronic conditions.
Yeah, I mean, illness and disease is all part of a dysfunctional immune system. So anybody that supports their immune system will be healthier than a person that isn't having something to support their immune system.
And I have a suspicion that if people were eating more ancestrally and nose to tail, we wouldn't have the situation we have with the with this new virus either. You know, with the high death
That
rates.
would be my guess, and that's the results that I see from the Paleomedicina Clinic in Budapest, Hungary, and other anecdotal stories that you read.
Yeah. I've interviewed another oncologist besides Dr. Thomas Seyfried that I keep up with his work, named Dr. Michael Lasanti. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not familiar with it.
He's in Italy. He's an American teaching at Salford University. He's the chair of translational medicine, and he's been researching the use of generic antibiotics like azithromycin and doxycycline to kill cancer stem cells. And he's done some early trials with the breast cancer patients, and he's shown the cancer stem cell markers dramatically reduced after just one regular, low dose treatment. And it seems to be more effective when you combine it with other, modalities like berberine or vitamin C or, vitamin D3, different things like that seem to enhance the ability of these Z-Pak or doxycycline to be very effective at killing cancer stem cells than even, the conventional treatments that they have for cancer. So I thought that was interesting.
My concern is the chemicals, number one, because we're talking about chemicals. And then number two, the question is, do we want just to kill the cancer cells, or do we want to get more fundamental and figure out why the cancer cell is malignant? Because everybody has cancer cells every moment in their body, but their body's ability to eat up those cancer cells is real. I mean, you don't have cancer malignancies, but you have cancer cells in your body. These are cells that are growing haphazardly with no ability to function properly, but they literally create a mechanism in themselves to self-kill themselves called apoptosis, or the immune system, if it's robust, the immune system sends out macrophages, which are certain types of white blood cells, identifies these cancer cells and eats them up. So your body cleans out the field naturally. So just to kill the cancer cells may be important, but to understand what is causing the progression and growth of those cancer cells is even more important.
And what do you think it fundamentally is? Is it just the host of bad foods and stuff?
I think the foods are a problem. The gut microbiome is a problem because the gut microbiome talks to the immune system to tell them, oh, I see this malignant cell, make sure you get there to kill it. And then the individual mitochondria, these are the energy producers of cells, is damaged because of a variety of reasons, most of which is free radical production. And there are ways to enhance the health of individual cells and the mitochondria using pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, which we've not discussed, but that's part of my protocols, and I use that every day.
Wow. That's very interesting. So do you see, I know you mentioned stress. So it's important to get lots of sunshine and rest, and how do we keep ourselves from being stressed out from our stress? We're stressed about being stressed,
That's probably the biggest problem that I have to deal with, and probably everybody has to deal with, because you just don't turn it on or off, right? I mean, you can say, I'm not going to eat this food, and you don't eat it. But you're going to say, I'm going to exercise, and you exercise. You say, I want to sleep, and you sleep. But when you say, I'm not going to be bothered by this stress of the pandemic. Does it happen that way? Can you turn it off that easily? No, it's difficult. There are methods to use. I mean, there are ways to give your mind something else to do. There are ways to relax. You know, meditation is great. There's certain muscle relaxation techniques that are great to help reduce your stress. Certainly walking outside for a few hours or being outside for a few hours is very stress relieving. There are yoga exercises that are very stress relieving. So there are methods that you can do to help relieve the stress, but sometimes you have to understand that there are certain things you can't change and you have to leave them be. And then other things that you can change, make a conscious effort to change them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's not an easy thing.
Yeah. Is
Definitely
stress
not.
really bigger than diet in terms of your
Yeah,
health?
yeah. I just wrote a paper that I published on my website today called Stress. It can damage your body and play havoc in your mouth. And this is an interesting article, and if you have some moments, I'll just tell you about it. I have a before and after picture of a patient of maybe 10, 15 years ago. This woman came into the dental office where I was working. She had severe lesions in her mouth. It looked very raw, pebbly, but there were no areas of unhealthy dental bacteria. So the periodontist I was working with sent her to her physician, checked her blood work, everything came back normal. But she eventually confided in my partner that she was being physically and sexually abused by her employer for the last couple months. Wow. And that created serious, as you can imagine, emotional stress. Uh-huh. He was able to convince her. She was young, in her early 30s. She was not married. He was convince her to leave her job, actually go to another state. She found a fantastic job, and she left the city and came back in about 4 months. When she came back, she had no medical treatment, no dental treatment. My partner took pictures of her mouth when she came back. All of the gum lesions were gone, and the only reason she got a healthy result was she was able to remove 100% of the emotional stress. So there is wonderful double-blind studies that show that stress can damage the gut microbiome, creates a weakened immune system, and creates autoimmune diseases like these lesions in her mouth and other lesions like skin rashes, a host of other autoimmune diseases. And once the stress is eliminated, if it can be eliminated quickly, those diseases go away. Unfortunately, if the stress is long going, even when it is finally removed a year, 2, 3 years later, the damage from the autoimmune disease may be permanent and will not heal, unfortunately. Wow. Stress is serious.
And yet, you know, the thing is, though, you hear about these people that go live in the Holocaust camps, and they live to be in their 90s. So there's something amazing about the human spirit. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. There's so much other things going on.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's just fascinating to see that.
But stress in its own right, if you compare a stress and not a stressor, the stress will damage the gut microbiome.
Have you looked into hypnosis? Is that a way to help with stress? Some people have talked about that.
I think that self-hypnosis, yes, and that would be literally in lines with meditation, because you're literally relaxing yourself and letting your mind kind of wander, and those are very stress relieving.
Because it's all about, stress is all about constricting the mind to certain focuses, always focus.
Yes, and allowing it to prey on your conscious constantly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has all been very fascinating. I want to let people know where we can continue to follow your work and stay abreast of your journey.
My website is drdanenberg.com, drdanenberg.com. There's lots of stuff on my website. My blogs, there's over 500 blogs on all kinds of subjects. You can just click on the search engine and type in a word, and if I've written anything about it, it'll pop up for you. I have 2 books. mini ebooks that are on Amazon. They were just published. One is called The Better Belly Blueprint. It's my concept of eating an animal-based diet with some plants that are low in phytates, oxalates, and lectins. And then Is Your Gut Killing You is also a book that really delves into what our primal ancestors, kind of how they evolved, how we became a society where we have an unhealthy gut, and how that unhealthy gut preys on periodontal disease and all other chronic diseases, and the vicious cycle that goes back and forth, and how to actually correct that gut to correct all those other problems.
And that reminds me of another point, is that
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that say, oh, I eat pizza. I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm skinny, I'm fine. I got to, so I don't have to worry about anything because I don't have a belly. But I think that's a real misnomer. That's a real
The
bad way
sad
to
thing
live.
is, these diseases are cumulative over time,
Mhm.
and it takes sometimes decades to occur. But when that person who's in their 20s and 30s are eating pizza and beer every day, gets to their 50s and all of a sudden has high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, and they get into their 50s and 60s and they have a heart attack, all of that can go back and be related to a diet that has been accumulating damaged areas in other organ systems that don't manifest until it gets over the edge.
So don't let that slim waistline fool you if you're eating lots of vegetable oils and processed
Nope.
carbs. It's not gonna be a long-lasting solution for health.
Nope, not at all.
Well, very good. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Danenberg, and I want people to check out your book, The Better Blueprint, the Better Belly Blueprint,
Yes.
The Better Belly Blueprint, or Is Your Gut Killing You? Also available, and those are both available at drdanenberg.com, right?
No, they're on Amazon.
Amazon.
I don't sell those, but they are on Amazon to download.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure too. Thank you. Take care.